Hello and welcome to another cinematography video. My name is Trenton Hoshiko, and today we're going to be doing another lighting diagram, this time of a photo, trying to talk about how to get certain shapes for your light, specifically window shapes. So as always with these videos, we're going to be in Draw. If you want to use the template that I'm using, you can find it on my Patreon. I have a link in the video's description. So we're going to go in here, and we're going to say new diagram, blank diagram, and then we're going to say file, and then import, and you're going to navigate to wherever you have that template. And so now I have that loaded. So now we're going to bring our photo in. So we're just going to drag it and drop it straight in here. I usually say resize so that it's not huge. And then make sure to save your document. So today we are going to look at 3 different ways to achieve this kind of effect. I'm not sure which one was actually used by Tara here, but these are 3 different ways that you could achieve something that looks reasonably like this, and they're going to have different costs associated with them. But let's first start out by looking at the image. So first off, this appears to be just a flat wall back behind the pot. There's this hard line that is being formed by the light source, and so that from that we can kind of see the angle. So part of it's in shadow and part of it's in light, but we're still getting enough exposure there to be able to tell it's separate from the wall. And if we look at the shadows right here, both from the actual leaves and from whatever window framing there is, we can see that it's not doing like a major double shadow. They're not exactly the most crisp shadow lines, but they're also not too soft either. So the light source coming through it is pretty directional, really. So with that taken care of, let's now build out our space. I'm going to use the floor plan tools as usual. Okay, so that's a pretty reasonable idea of what this space might look like. And last but not least, our potted plant friend. Let's turn it green so that we know that it's a plant. Now from here, this is the first option. And essentially what it is you're going to take your lamp and you're going to put it outside the window and cast your light through the window using whatever actual frame there is. Now we are going to aim the light in particular to make sure that half of it is going to be blocked by that wall so that we get this hard line. And it would be something like this. So pretty simple to do, and you can actually do this all with one light. If you were still missing enough exposure to see on this side against the wall and to actually get some separation of tone between this and complete black and this and then the edge of the pot, you could use something like a lantern in the space to just bring up that exposure just a little bit. But this really is the most simple way to do it. You just need 1, maybe 2 lamps, a window, and a plant to achieve this look. You'll want to be using something like a monolight or an open face light or a light with a Fresnel to be able to get this light to be hard enough to actually create these lines and these shapes. Now, that could be something then like this, where we just have the Fresnel tool and we bring it in. You don't necessarily need this depending on how hard your initial light source is. If you're using a light panel, you'd probably need something to make it a little bit harder. If you're using a monolight like the GVM P80S or pretty much any of the aperture monolights, you probably wouldn't need the Fresnel to get something that looked reasonably like this. If you want to guarantee these lines to be as hard as they are, that Fresnel will certainly help. And if you're using an older kind of light like an airy tungsten Fresnel, then that Fresnel aspect is already built in here for you. Okay, so then let's move on to our second option here. I'm just going to copy this and move it down, and then we're going to work with this one right here. So now, let's say you're in a studio environment. You might not have this window. Let's just delete it for now to make things easy. What you can do is, now that we're in a studio, we don't have this actual window here, but we can use something called a snoot. I have a video about snoots coming out soon, and basically a snoot is a tube that focuses the light using a lens oftentimes. If it's an optical snoot, there are non-optical snoots that just kind of like restrict the light, but an optical snoot also allows you to put things called gobos in, which are little shaped pieces of metal that project images onto the wall using light. And this is really cool and really useful. I recently used it for the background of some documentary footage to help create the impression of a window behind the subject. And that's exactly what I'm thinking we could do here. If you use a snoot that has a window gobo on it, then you can cast that shape of the window onto your subject here from still, once again, your single lamp. Now, this setup will cost a little bit more because you're going to be using the snoot, but there's actually some reasonably affordable options that are available now. If you're curious about that, I do have links down in the video's description, but you still can get away with this with one lamp and one snoot. Now, here, you might actually need, because that light's being so restricted, to use a lantern to bring up that exposure overall, to make sure that you get the wall and that left side of that plant having a little bit of exposure on it. But this is option 2. So basically still 1, maybe 2 lights, and then now the snoot. Now let's move all of this down, and we're going to copy this one more time, and I'm going to show you a really cool, very professional way to do this. So for this more professional one, we're going to be using some more intensive grip gear. We're going to be using a C-stand, and I don't actually have a C-stand icon, so we're just going to use this triangle here. And we're going to put this C-stand next to our light, and having our light still casting directly onto our plant. Now the C-stand is going to hold a special HIV modifier. Now, you can do this a couple different ways. If you didn't really care about having the actual window shape in particular, you could use a cookie, which is a cut pattern. Usually they're kind of more to resemble what it would look like to have light passing through leaves to create shape on the background. But there's also things called window patterns, which are essentially the same thing that allow you to have a window shape that your light is passing through. This is almost a larger scale version of doing the snoot, and so you'll be able to get more light and a little bit more control with the shape of it. So let's just take this, and we're going to rename this. Instead of bounce, we're going to call this cookie/window pattern. So we're going to call this right here cookie window pattern, and it's being held there by your C-stand and allows it to create the shape against the wall. Now, but you might be asking, how are we going to get that hard line right here that would be represented by the edge of the window in the first option? That's because of it being blocked by the actual window edge. Well, we're going to take a flag and we're simply going to put that on the side here and block part of that light down to make sure that we have that hard edge. Now you will need a second C-stand for this. The benefit of doing this way is that you get a lot more control over exactly how it falls. Now I would still have the lantern so that you can have a little bit of boost to your exposure if you need it. But these are basically the 3 different ways that you could do it. It's sort of actually 4 different ways. Basically, you can start with a harder source lamp and just pass it through the window and try to get that window frame to actually create the shadow on the wall and on the plant, and adjust your light to make sure it's blocking and creating that hard edge. If you want to make sure your shadows are really sharp, you can use something like a Fresnel to help with making sure that as it passes through and hits that window frame, your light is very directional and creates those shadows. And the next option is to use an actual snoot to project the window pattern onto the plant and the wall. I really like this option. It's very portable, it's not super gear intensive, and it's very effective. And then lastly, if you have more grip equipment and you want more control over it, you can use something like a cookie or a window pattern to create that light shape, and then use 2 C-stands to flag and shape it to make sure that it creates that hard line. In all of these, I am still using a lantern as a second lamp to make sure that we're getting that base exposure so that we have exposure all the way across the wall and on the pot, and then we get to have that tonal difference between the different aspects of it. The first option here is incredibly cost effective. You literally really just need 1 lamp, maybe 2, and the lantern, or some other form of diffusion. The second option here is a little more money with the Fresnel, And the Fresnel and the Snoot cost similarly, so either of these could work. It just kind of depends on if you think that you would be using a Fresnel or a Snoot more and what would be a better investment for you. And then the last option here is a lot more money because of the more grip intensive nature, but gives you a lot more control. So no matter your budget, you do have an option to create a look that is like this image. I hope this video has helped you out with getting an idea of how to create window lights like these. If you enjoyed the video, please give me a like down below. It helps me with the YouTube algorithm and reaching new audiences. You can also subscribe for upcoming videos about lighting, cinematography, and micro-budget filmmaking in general. If you want to support these videos, I have a Patreon that's linked down below and affiliate links in the video's description that help support this channel at no extra cost to you. Thank you so much for watching, and if you have any questions about how these are made or my process for making these diagrams, please leave those in the comments down below. I'm really happy to answer them and to discuss this because I love talking about lighting. Take care, everybody, and have a good day.